What I'm going to attempt to do today is talk about the story of CIFCO over the last 10 years and skim over pretty much everything so we can, lots I'd like to share, and the time is short, so it's going to be a skimming over of our story, and I'm sure we'll have lots of time to talk about it in more details. So there's a bit of an overview here. We'll touch in on the history. Then we'll talk about FlatMap 5, which is a program that we use. I'll get into that. And we'll go into landscape level planning. Then we'll go into our 5 treatment types. And earlier today I talked about hiring Rachel to do a documentary for us. And I'm actually going to show a little clip of our in the process of being made documentary. It's a 5-minute clip. And then I'll put some closing thoughts. So I'm sure everyone here has a moment when the reality of climate change, and in this region the reality of wildfire associated with it, hits them. For me, that moment in time was 2007. You know, in 1998 it was a really hot year, and I was like, this seems like a weird kind of temperature, weird kind of season. Then in 2003, there was a fires in Kelowna, and I was going, something's going on here, but that's a different forest type, so maybe it has nothing to do with the Kootenays. 2006, I was vacuuming pine beetles on my carpet in the living room, and I was going, that's pretty weird too. But then in 2007, I was sitting at my desk, actually working on the management plan. CIFCO had not come about yet. We're just in the process of coming about. And we're working on a management plan, a draft, looking at it. And I look out the window, and in the distance I could see the Spirit Creek fire. The Spirit Creek fire that summer was the biggest fire in BC, 3,000 hectares. There was 175 firefighters there. There was 25 pieces of machinery. There was 8 helicopters. The chopper kept passing in front of my house back and forth. And I'd been on the lookout for about 7 days going, the wind could turn any time. I'm just a few kilometers away. I could be affected by that. I was sitting there looking out the window, and suddenly a chopper hovered in front of my window for a little while. I could see, I was on the 3rd floor of my house, I could see the pilot, and I was like, and then the pilot looked at the house, looked around. We didn't connect eye to eye, but flew away, and I was like, that's weird. So I walked down to the 2nd floor, stepped on the balcony, looked out north, and there was there was flames and there was smoke, and it looked like it was coming 300 or 400 meters away from our house. It was like, oh my goodness, there's a fire, it's really close to our house, we need to evacuate right now. So run down the stairs, grab the daughter, 4 years old, say, hey girl, let's go camping. Just decided, yay, we're going camping. Bring her to the camper van, sit her down, then walk in and say, hey wife, 10 minutes to pack up, we gotta get out of here. So the wife starts packing up. I run upstairs, passport, papers, whatever's required. Actually, you realize when you evacuate that you go into a room and you look around and you go, I don't really need anything here. There's really very little that you need, but grab a few things, hard drive, get into the van, drop everything, look at the daughter at the back. When are we leaving camping? Go back in, cross the wife, grab a few more things. 10 minutes later, we're in the van, we're ready to evacuate. I look back, my daughter's sitting there. She's got about 12 stuffies and 15 dolls, and she's got the biggest smile on her face. And my wife and said, well, I guess we all have our priorities straight here. So I send the wife and the daughter in the van down the hill, and I run around, put sprinklers on the balcony, both balconies, and jump in the truck and say, can we go find where that fire is? So I look around down the highway, up Neighbors Road, find the fire. By the time I get there, there's already 2-unit crews, and they've been there, and they're actioning it. And the only reason my house didn't burn down that summer is because slow count was happening. Slow count was happening. There was, already firefighters there. There's already choppers flying back and forth. And for me, that was a major wake-up call. It was like, this is real, this is happening in our house, it could happen to us anytime, and we are so ill prepared for it. And from that day on, so like I said, I was working on the management plan. And by the way, when I say we throughout this presentation, I should say Tom Bradley, which is sitting right here. Do you want to stand up? We is the two of us really for the last 10 years working on a lot of this stuff. So Tom, you could probably be here and do this presentation, and you'd probably be a little bit more eloquent than me. But anyways, so working on that management plan, and we had been working on it for a few years, and we were looking at a land base through many different lenses. You know, we're looking at it through water quality, water quantity. We're looking at it through, you know, the lens of wildlife. We're looking at it through the lens of ecosystem-based management. But one of the lenses that we were not using was wildfire and climate change. And on that day, I talked to Tom and I said, we need to use that lens. We need to add this lens to our management plan. So, 2008, we got a community forest. Slocan Valley had been working on it for 5 years. And right away we said, well, let's do a plan. Let's do something that we can work with so we know areas that need to be treated right away. So we started with proximity to infrastructure. That seems like easy. That's the, I need to know how to do this. Yeah. Yes. Proximity to infrastructure. Then we did fire risk and consequences. And then we blended them together. The dark red was like, okay, those are the areas that we should be concerned about. Then we said, well, let's rewrite our stocking standards, because if we really want to prepare the wildland-urban interface for fires, rewriting our stocking standards is really important. Two highlights from rewriting our stocking standards is we reduced the target stocking in the interface zone to 400 stem per hectares, and then we also made deciduous trees a preferred species. And then we got to work, really. It's like, okay, we got to do something. Let's buy a truck, let's buy an excavator, let's buy a chipper, let's hire some guys, let's go out there and let's start treating some land. So we worked for 5 years, excitedly, around the land base, treating land. We treated about 200 hectares between 2008 and 2013, and approximate investment in grants of 1.4 million. And during that time, we went to a workshop that was held by the community resilience people, and Craig was there, and Cindy was there, and they told us that it was not getting better. It was actually going to get worse. And we went, okay, we're doing a lot of work, it's great, but holy smoke, is it a challenge? What are we going to do next? We, at that point, decided to zoom out on all the work we had done. And it was a sad story. It had been working for 5 years, and the purple was what we had treated during those 5 years. And when you look at it in relationship to the land base, it felt like there was a lot more work that needed to be done. So we said to ourselves, we have to scale our effort, and we have to become way more efficient at what we're doing. So where and how should we work was the next question. We talked about it a lot. Two main questions arose. The first one, is there some areas that burn more frequently? If we can identify those, that'd be very useful. Second one was there fire movement paths in the landscape? Could we actually identify the areas that the fire was moving through? So then we turned to fire behavior modeling, which seemed to make the most sense. We hired Bob Ray, going to hear him tomorrow, he's a fire ecologist. He worked with us for a while. He identified for us what he thought was the best program at the time. That was 2014. And he said, you guys should import FLAM Map 5 from the US Joint Fire Science Program in the Rocky Mountain Research Station. He thought that was the best program, so we imported it. Again, I say we, but really Tom did most of the work. What was great about that program is that we could input into it terrain, slope, aspects, elevation. We could also put vegetation cover, species density, height, crown base height, crown volume. We could input weather temperature, wind speed, wind direction, effective terrain and daytime heating on wind, and also fuel condition, effects of previous weather patterns on flammability. So Tom probably spent a year in putting all of that data into the computer. After a year, what was great was that we could then light fires, virtual fires. We could light fires in the computer and we could actually see what they were doing. So we decided, let's choose the worst day. Actually, Bob told us, you guys should choose the worst day because that's really what's going to help you figure out what the movement patterns are and what you should be worried about. So we said, okay, it's 30, 35 degrees in August. It's been a long, hot summer. There's dry fuel everywhere. There's 16-kilometer winds, which is about average winds. And the fire suppression's not been successful. And then we lit some fires. And what was interesting is that some fires didn't do much. They kind of, north slope, this is Winlaw watershed here, so you're on the north slope surrounded by water. They petered around for a while, and then they just kind of extinguished themselves. And then other ones did the opposite. That's the same Winlaw watershed, as opposed to being on the north slope, it's on the south slope. And this is here, you can see travel distance, it's about 1.2 kilometers. So this is 2 hours. We've got some private land here, we've got some homes. So we started to realize, okay, this is great. So once you've got that, you can start to light a whole bunch of fires. So we lit hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fires. And these three maps that you see here show you what happens when you light 50 random ignitions across a landscape. Here you've got 100, here you've got 150. And what you can start to see is some of the patterns. You can see that there's areas that burn more frequently. The redder the color, the more frequent a fire passes through. And there's also areas that really don't have hardly any fires going through them. And then you can do the same thing, same maps using arrows so you can see the direction of the fires. Oh yeah, and then you can do all kinds of cool things with the program. Like one of them is, let's just erase everything that didn't travel 2 kilometers or more. Then you can say, let's just look at fires that started at this elevation. And let's just look at fires that started at that elevation. And so it gives you an idea of what happens on a land base. Here what you're looking at is just the fires that travel 2 or more kilometers. And you're starting to see some patterns here. There's this, there's this, there's this. There's some main fire corridors that exist on the land base. And the other thing that we found that was really interesting about using fire behavior is that it was a really interesting communication tool. When we went to the public and started to talk about what we had found, and they could see their house on a Google map, and they could see the fire that started a few kilometers away was in their house 6 hours later, then it gives a real sense of urgency for residents when they start to realize what's actually happening. And then what we start to do is like, okay, we've identified some main travel paths. What if we input some fuel breaks into them? What if we actually treat some of the areas? So virtually again, we inputted some fuel breaks. And then you can see, put a fuel brakes right here. So there's definitely a change in fire behavior. This one jumped, a little too narrow. This one went around, not long enough. But it gives you an idea of how a fuel break would actually affect one of the fires within these main travel paths. So then we had that tool, and then what do we do with it? So our next step was to combine our knowledge of the CFA, community forest, and combine that with the fire movement paths from our fire behavior modeling, and then ask ourselves three key questions. The first one was, where is it a priority to reduce fuels? Again, we use the same methodology as earlier. There's like the risk and consequence and proximity. And then we use, where is it feasible to operate? That's one that often people think about. It's like it's really nice to imagine a landscape level fuel breaks, but if you cannot get to it, then it's not even very useful. And the last one was, where are there reasonably sized treatment units that we can put into the land base?